And now, the lowdown with economist and political strategist Elson Low.
Good evening, and welcome to the Lowdown. Thank you for joining us tonight, folks. Another edition of the Lowdown. You know we love hanging out on a Saturday night. Welcome to the Lowdown, folks. It's going to be fun as always. Folks, you know what to do. Share that link. Let's give everyone a chance to see the show. I ran into a guy who watches the show and he said he always shares the link. So I encourage you to share the link as well. Thanks for tuning in here tonight, guys. Welcome to the Lowdown. It's going to be fun. We're going to cover a couple of different topics today, but also we're going to take a slightly different approach and actually deal directly with a video that was recently released by the government, where the president is making some remarks that I think aren't going to convince anyone. But we're going to deal directly with that, folks, and help you to understand exactly what is going on. Welcome to the Lowdown. I'm your host, Elson Low. Thanks for starting your Saturday night on a high with Elson Low, folks. Welcome to the Lowdown. Share that link. Let's give everyone a chance to see the show. It's always fun to be here with you guys. Always fun. You know we love the Lowdown. So welcome to the Lowdown. Now, folks, we're gonna touch on a couple of issues. We're gonna touch on the issue of the oil audits of the offshore oil expenses. You know that's an area of controversy where we have had to force the government to take action. The government has been resisting, checking to see whether or not Guyana is being potentially being robbed by the offshore oil companies. The government has been resisting even checking that. We're gonna highlight that again and highlight some of the ridiculous things they're saying now on this issue, which is a multi-billion US issue, folks. Billions of US over the course of the life of the oil industry. You could be looking at tens of billions of US that could be lost due to this issue. So, folks, we're gonna touch on that. We're also gonna discuss a bit some of these cash grants that they're providing for small businesses and give you a perspective on how much more could be done, folks, because that is such a minimal effort. We're gonna give you some perspective on that. We're also going to talk a bit about some of the infrastructure questions that we've got here in Guyana, and as to whether infrastructure development is actually yielding the progress that Guyanese have been looking for. Of course, we've now seen the government 3 years in office, folks, 3 years in office, and you have to ask yourself whether you are better off than you were under the coalition a few years ago. The government cannot hide anymore. I mean, it's been several years they've been in office. So we're going to talk a bit about that as well, folks. Folks, share that link. Let's bring everyone into the show. Always fun to be here on the Lowdown with you. We've got a meme of the week here for you. It's entertaining as always. We've got some funny videos here for you as well. It's going to be a fun night, folks. So share that link, and then let's get going. So, folks, the first thing we're gonna throw up here is a bit of a dark meme, but we're gonna have the operator throw that first one up as we kick off our memes of the week. And here you've got, we can just put that on the screen there. Here we've got someone saying, wasn't planning on drinking today, but it's Friday. And I miss Dr. Roger luncheon. Oh, goodness. You know, Guyanese always with these dark jokes, folks. How could people say this? But, you know, condolences to Dr. Luncheon. It's sad to see another Guyanese has been around in the political scene for a long time ago. So we wish him and wish his family condolences. But, you know, Guyanese love to make a joke out of everything, folks. They make a joke out of everything. Wasn't planning on drinking today, but it's Friday, and I miss Dr. Roger luncheon. Goodness me. Someone was saying just the other day that that Roger luncheon has been old for us. When I was a child, Roger luncheon was old. Which gives you a perspective. Some people said that it's he'll be here forever, and then only a week or two passes and he passes on. The person said actually on in replying to a comment on this issue, that they feel bad for saying that he'll live forever. But anyway, condolences to his family. I just thought that was one of those things that Guyanese love to say. So looking for any excuse to drink, apparently. Folks, drink responsibly this particular weekend. And again, condolences to Dr. Lunchen's family. Now, that's one element of things. The other thing that we want to chat about with you tonight here is, as we mentioned, it's the 3-year mark, or it's just past the 3-year mark that the PPP has been in office. So we're going to give you a quick video here that gives you a perspective on how we think that they have performed. And if the operator could pull up that quick video, I'll give you some remarks right afterward. Some of you may recognize this video, so let's take a look at it.
Can you watch me teach you how to ride? Look at this. Oh my god, that was a failure. That was gotta be my share relative. Normally he does ride good, but I don't know what happened there this morning. Trying to he's still watch you see he's still coming out around doing a certain nonsense again. I don't know, he watch. He gone over so come back over so. And it's shame we because we try to watch, you see? Anyway.
One more time, operator. Some people may not.
Riding company, watch me teach you how to ride. Look at this. Oh my god, that was a failure. That was gotta be my share relative. Normally he does ride good, but I don't know what happened there this morning. But the thing is that we were trying to he's still watch you see he's still coming out around doing a certain nonsense again. I don't know, he watch. He gone over so come back over so. And it's shame we because we try to watch, you see? Anyway.
All right, folks. Well, that is, I think, a perfect metaphor for the way that the PvP has been. A perfect analogy for the way the PvP has performed this first 3 years. We're shame of them. I mean, goodness me, spending money. And we're going to get into some of that tonight. And people are thinking to themselves, oh, goodness, pressure. In fact, I saw some posts on Facebook today where people are saying Guyana is getting too expensive for Guyanese. Pressure, as the Guyanese would say. I remember someone saying, in the colloquial expression, things is not nice at all. Goodness, folks. After 3 years, you'd have thought that the growth that Guyana has experienced with the availability of oil revenues and with us having such a high poverty rate, as much as 43%, as indicated by UNICEF, that you would have seen deliberate efforts by the government to deal, number one, with poverty, number two, with the cost of living crisis, and to really help to drive Guyana forward in terms of the key metrics of people's well-being. But instead, you've seen the government try to build infrastructure, build it poorly, waste money, and Guyanese really be in frustration. So, of course, the views expressed in that particular shot are the views of that particular individual. I'm sure that guy who rides better on other days. But that just happened to be a great metaphor for what's going on there. The opposition often says that the PvP likes to flick and hope that they land on their feet rather than their head. That's a perfect example of them landing on their head and not on the bike. So, folks, that's what really has been going on over the course of the first 3 years. But, we want to give you a little bit of a better understanding of this. And that's why we're going to jump over to the next slide there as we continue. So here we have the leading opposition has said that ordinary citizens have nothing to show for the PvP's 3 years in office. Now, the thing that I think is so important for us to understand and kind of get the context around is that we have to hold PvP to a higher standard than we would have held any previous government because of the revenues available. From 2018 to now, the national budget has tripled. That is an incredible increase in the national budget. Now, are you 3 times better off as an average Guyanese? Do you feel substantially better off, like your life has made a lot of progress? Is that the way that you feel? Because many Guyanese are frustrated. Folks, this year's budget was $782 billion. We're seeing the government come back for more money, but we'll get there in a second. Goodness me, folks. And instead of seeing people's standard of living raised to a totally different level, people are frustrated. Now, one of the things we also want to point out is that by some measures of income, GDP per capita and purchasing power parity, and this is IMF figures, by some measures, Guyana is wealthier per person or has a higher income per person than the United Kingdom. Do you feel like you're living in a country with a higher standard of living than the United Kingdom? Do you feel wealthier than the average United Kingdom citizen? Or is it that the government has not been able to leverage these tremendous resources to make people's lives better? We're going to go into detail as to some of the things that are not being done, some of the things that should be done, some of the waste and the theft, and really the way that Guyana is just not being managed to the benefit of its citizens. So we're going to give you some perspective on that. But the first thing we want to talk about tonight is as we continue on, it isn't exactly a meme of the week, but it sure feels like a meme, is some remarks by the president on this issue. Now, it seems to us that some of the recent outreaches that the PPP has had, they've been getting a lot of criticism, even from some of their supporters. And of course, the cost of living crisis has not only affected AP and new supporters, not only affected people who are moderate, it has affected people in the PUP as well. It's affected the average poor PUP supporter, whether that's somebody of African descent, Indian descent, Armenian descent. Everyone is affected by the cost of living crunch and by the government's inability to do anything about it. Folks, we take this opportunity to remind you that the government has put aside a minuscule $5 billion for the cost of living mitigation this year. And that $5 billion adds up, folks. What month is it? It's August, folks, and the government has not been able to give any proper account of how they've even spent that money. In fact, they have indicated that they have not spent the money. Now it's August. There's only a couple months left in the year. We've gone past the halfway mark by some distance, and they've still not spent this money. Gosh, I mean, you have to ask yourself if they really cared about the cost of living crisis. Why would they wait until August before they even spend the money that is allocated to help deal with the cost of living crisis? Now, we also want to point out that that $5 billion is next to nothing, folks. That is not even 1% of the national budget. The cost of living crisis that we've been going through for the past couple of years has been the most severe cost of living crisis for the last 40 years. And in Guyana, we've seen a higher oil price, which has provided us with actually quite a lot of extra revenue. In fact, we were able to indicate that last year about 60 billion Guyana dollars in revenue we were able to receive that we didn't even expect because of the war in Ukraine. But of course, the downside of the war in Ukraine and many other factors is that you see prices go up. And we're quite anxious that flour prices are about to go up once more, because the war in Ukraine has escalated again with grain shipments that were previously being allowed through after a deal was struck between Russia and Ukraine. Those grain shipments have actually are now going to go through. And so the price of wheat has already started to go up. Things like sunflower oil, your cooking oil is going to go up as well, or should go up, as well as many other products that are related to wheat, such as your bread and your pastries and so on. Last time we saw a 25% increase, I think it was around 25% increase in the price of flour by Namilco. That, of course, increased the price of bread. People were complaining that the tennis roll can't even afford a bag of tennis roll now. The pressure is too much. As one social media user was saying, the pressure is getting worse. Folks, the people are always making jokes about these things. But unfortunately, this is the reality that the average Guyanese faces, is that the pressure is getting worse. But, of course, in the midst of this, PP has gone out to speak to its supporters, and it's getting a lot of negativity. It's getting a lot of criticism. And so the president came out now to defend the PPP's infrastructure-focused development program, which stands in contrast to our belief that you have to invest much more directly in people's livelihood, that you should provide structured, conditional cash grants that will, one, eliminate poverty quickly, but two, incentivize people to ensure that their children finish school, to ensure that they get their healthcare checkups, and thereby we can improve attendance at school, improve pass rates, and improve the healthcare system. Things like that we've talked at length about on this show. You've heard it on this show that we're going to focus on the way that we can use cash transfers to deal with poverty, deal with inequality, while also producing better development outcomes. Of course, it's always frustrating to see that despite billions more being spent on education, we've actually seen worst pass rate in mathematics, the critical subject of mathematics at CSEC for quite in the last year here in Ghana, which is really, really unfortunate. It's almost as if, we're wasting millions of dollars rather than spending it what we should be spending it on to get better outcomes. One such area that we want to focus on, of course, is making sure teachers are adequately compensated and ensuring that students are able to come to school and get hot meals and so on to help them as they learn. Now, folks, we're going to jump across here to a couple of minutes of the president speaking. And I'm going to give you some perspective on it.
That we must understand that I want to spend some very brief moment outlining. There is a concept called net transferable value. What is a net transferable value? If you go all across the country now, you will see the value of real estate increasing. If you go to All Boys Town, where we did the new boulevard in All Boys Town and all the streets that we're doing there, in Barbies, in Linden, what do you think is occurring? There's a concept called the net transferable value. As the government improve infrastructure, improve drainage, give better roads, create new road networks, new highways, what happens? The value of property goes up. There's a transferable value that goes to the people in the community. When you have a new hotel going up in a region, a new stadium going up in a region, new athletic track going up in a region, investment in resorts, investment in new housing area, what do you think is happening? There's a transferable value. The tens of thousands of persons who are working in the housing sector, additional income. Those who are supplying the sand, the lorry workers, the truck drivers, the mechanics. So when the government invests in infrastructure, it is not that you're eating this, you will eat the school, but it creates what you call transferable value. There is a social value.
All right, folks, thanks for bearing with us for a minute or two there. Now, the first thing that I want to point out as we break this down is, I don't know about you, but what I was picking up there is, to my mind, not an appropriate kind of body language or energy from the president there, where, I wouldn't like him to be speaking, let me put it this way, I wouldn't like him to be speaking to me in that fashion. And I get the impression that he's speaking to the average voter in that fashion. That to me is not what I would consider to be an appropriate way to conduct, to be speaking to voters. Now, of course, it could be that he didn't have his coffee for the morning or something. Who knows? But I don't see that as appropriate. That strikes me as, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But that aside, one of the things that we want to point out here, one of the things that's really critical, and we talk a lot about on this show, we have demonstrated and we've looked at IMF numbers and IMF recommendations that were made as late as 2022, where the IMF in its Article 4 consultation urged the government to reform its investment program, its program of spending on capital projects like infrastructure, urged the government to reform. And what has been indicated by the IMF is that Guyana, when it comes to these types of programs, is much worse off than the average Latin American and Caribbean country. That is to say, we are governed much worse than those countries. For every dollar that we spend on these projects, whereas some countries may lose 30 cents, Guyana loses 41 cents. We're way worse. And developed countries, effectively governed countries, they only lose 13 cents. So Guyana is losing far, far more, almost 3 times as much, actually more than 3 times as much as developed countries when it comes to these types of projects. So, while the government may be building infrastructure, it is in the process wasting a lot of money. What does that mean for you, though, folks? It means that even if you're just to govern Guyana, as well as, say, Trinidad or Jamaica or St. Lucia or Mexico or something, you could produce all the infrastructure they're talking about, plus immediately raise 150,000 people out of poverty. And I'm not saying you govern the country as well as in the developed world, as Sweden or something. I'm saying if you just govern it as well as your run-of-the-mill Caribbean or Latin American country. And you could do that. You could raise all those people out of poverty with a snap of a finger. Now, we believe that poverty is something that is at the core of what the government should target. So whether or not they're governing effectively, their focus should be on dealing with poverty. But don't let them come to you with a Ginkgo ram goat story, basically trying to indicate to you that what they're doing is enough. That is nowhere near enough. Anybody could do this. In fact, any random Caribbean country could do all of these things they're talking about, plus pull 150,000 people out of poverty overnight with the savings. Any random Caribbean country's government could do that. That's how bad they are. Way worse than everybody else. So don't let them come to you with this false standard, folks. False standard. It is not just about building infrastructure. It's about building infrastructure properly so that you have good roads. It's not about building roads for building roads' sake. It's about ensuring that you have proper roads. It's about ensuring that those roads last. It's about ensuring that you see improvements in the quality of our infrastructure as more money is put in, not just more infrastructure. You know, these are the roads that we're seeing. Some of the things that we've really been talking a lot about on this show is that, you know, these roads last about 5 minutes before they're gone. You know, we've seen very many instances where the roads, before you know it, potholes there, potholes everywhere. We all remember that road near to UG there where after only 2 days you saw it beginning to deteriorate. We remember the road on Thomas Lands where after 2 weeks you saw it starting to deteriorate. You know, that is not at all what we're looking for in terms of moving this country forward. If you're going to spend money, you have to spend it in a proper way. Now, that is the argument as it regards infrastructure spending. So we're saying that infrastructure spending is important and good, but it should not be done in a way that wastes the money or where the money is being stolen. And that is ultimately the concern, because who among us would accept that Guyana can be worse governed than, I don't know, Antigua or St. Lucia or Barbados or something? I mean, is there any particular reason that we should be suffering on the worse governance than that? We're just as capable as other Caribbean countries. You will recall that we always perform well at regional examinations and whatnot. It is just that we've got poor governance and a government that's unwilling to accept and do something about this. Now, the IMF made these recommendations. They conducted an evaluation in 2017 and they made recommendations. In 2019, the coalition government moved to implement some of these recommendations and reform. But the process was not complete. Now the PPP is in office. The IMF has continued to make the recommendations. This is a long-term survey where they looked at the history of governance in Guyana, and they gave us an estimate of the quality of governance. Now, years have passed. They've continued to make the same recommendations over and over. But you think the government would listen to that? You think the government has any interest in improved governance? Instead, what you're hearing from folks like the vice president and so on is you hear, oh, it's a no-brainer. We don't need to check in, do feasibility studies and so on. Now, the IMF has directly said that we should do feasibility studies to evaluate the best way to use the funds. Rather, the PPP seems intent on wasting the funds, wasting these opportunities for Guyana to move forward. There is no reason for 150,000 people to be living in poverty in this country other than the PPP's incompetence. There's no reason for that. Now, we also believe that one or another poverty reduction must be a priority of any government, and it will be a priority of our government. That's why we put forward so many proposals that will deal with this. But we will also run this country well. We will run this country not just as well as Trinidad or Jamaica or St. Kitts and Nevis or Mexico or something. We will run this country, and we will aim to continually improve to run this country as well as a Norway or a Sweden or a Finland, as well as a Botswana. That's the way we're going to run this country efficiently. We're going to make good use of these revenues. We appreciate the struggles that we've been through as a nation over the years, and we will make use of these funds properly. Hire the appropriate experts, hire the appropriate consultants, work together with civil society, hire graduates from the University of Guyana, put money into the University of Guyana to improve it, make the University of Guyana free, write off student debt. We are going to be looking to build capacity in this country. Build capacity, not tear down, not fight down, not suppress, not pretend that there's nothing that can be done. refuse to implement IMF recommendations. We will implement those recommendations. We will conduct thorough evaluations of these systems that are in place. And we will ensure that we cut out the corruption that has become rampant. There's a friends, family, and favorite country right now on the PvP. Their elites are also some of the biggest beneficiaries when it comes to this, the resources of the country. Rather, we believe that we must govern for all Guyanese. We believe that we must ensure that spending is not for the sake of spending, but improves people's standard of living, people's quality of life. Now, folks, we started off by saying that after this 3-year period, that the PvP has not demonstrated to the Guyanese public that it is able to improve their lives. And that's why the president's coming up with this frustration here. To say, oh, they're building these things, we may not be giving you direct, we may not be helping to improve your life directly with financial improvements. Your income may not be higher, but we're building you roads. Folks, you can build those roads, plus you can improve people's financial standing. You can make people's lives better. You can ease the cost of living crisis. You can pull people out of poverty if you just run the country properly. That's all. That's the mere minimum that you need to do. And they can't even acknowledge that they don't know what they're doing and they need help. They can't even acknowledge it. And so year after year, you hear the IMF coming to say, we need to see some improvements. These things need to be adjusted. You need to evaluate. You need to conduct studies. And you hear the government, it's a no-brainer. Studies. Well, what kind of studies are you talking about? Folks, we cannot accept nonsense from the PvP. We cannot accept that. We cannot accept them bluffing Guyanese and trying to make it seem as if they're working. We will govern this country properly with expertise, with University of Guyana graduates, with civil society, and that will help to move Guyana forward. This idea that you can come and everybody will be somehow impressed by what they're saying I don't think that holds up. And that is, of course, separate and apart from the fact that we've mentioned already on this show, their reluctance to do anything about the cost of living crisis. Folks, what we have to understand as we go forward as an oil-producing nation is that the dynamics that we're looking at are very different. Now, when you don't have oil or similar commodities, when you face inflation, it's painful. There's nothing you can do about it. You try and take what measures you can, but you have to face inflation. But when you're an oil producer, usually what happens with inflation is the price of oil goes up. And so you make more money while you also have a cost of living crisis. And that means you have more resources available to deal with the cost of living crisis. Folks, these guys just love to pretend that there's nothing they can do. We've already demonstrated on this show multiple times. They made an additional unexpected $60 billion last year, which is $300,000 per household. We have said they need to find an equitable way to distribute that money to deal with the cost of living crisis. That is what we have said. And that is what we didn't even expect. That doesn't mean that we can't take additional measures given the severity of the cost of living crisis. Now, even if inflation cools a bit this year, it is not that the prices have gone back to what they were before. It's that they stopped rising as quickly, but they're still very, very high. That is the challenge here, folks. It is not the prices have gone back to what they were before. That is the sad thing. On the coalition, you saw very low rates of inflation. You saw us also increase substantially public servant salaries, and those low rates of inflation remain there. PvP has been sluggish, refused to increase public servant salaries unless they absolutely had to, and even then, only for small subsections of the overall public service. It is really something that's very sad that we're seeing in Guyana. This level of just not caring, but also this level of incompetence. But you say to yourself, all right, well, maybe they've turned it around, they're going to govern better this year. We've talked about them not using the money for cost of living relief that was put out there, and it's already August. But let's talk about someplace else where they're coming to the Guyanese public with nonsense again. Let's get the next slide up here as we see what's going on in the parliament right now. So what we're seeing is the government is going to the treasury for 91 billion more after already passing a budget of 782 billion, a budget 40% bigger than last year's budget. But folks, let's break this down for you. Folks, you may recall that a couple of weeks ago, they came to the parliament for in excess of $30 billion. Now they're coming back for in excess of $60 billion, and that's how you're getting this $90 billion figure. But folks, you mean to tell me that they came for 30 billion and they didn't know that they needed the 60 billion 2 weeks ago? They didn't know that. Folks, they didn't know that. How can you be governing in such a haphazard manner that you did not know 2 weeks ago that you had a $60 billion expense that you needed to cover? What are you doing? Are you not paying any attention to what is going on? Well, folks, you're going to see later on in the show that this is exactly what's going on. 2 weeks ago, they needed 30 billion. Now they're coming back for twice as much. Instead of making one thing and withdrawing the money, they are now coming back for a second amount. Goodness, folks. And they're standing up there with a straight face to tell the Guyanese public that they wanted this money. Now that is a huge sum of money. That money, if they wanted to access it, they should have come to the Guyanese public 2 weeks ago and had a proper discussion. Not be giving it in dribbles every 2 weeks. They're going to come again in another 2 weeks for another 50 billion, and then 2 weeks later for another 80 billion, and then 2 weeks later for another 100 billion. Is that how we're going to govern this country? Folks, it is no wonder that you're hearing that Guyana is worse off, that Guyana is not governed as well as your typical Caribbean and Latin American country. If these folks don't even know that they're going to need $60 billion 2 weeks from now, don't even know that, can't plan out something as simple as that, it's no wonder that the country is not being governed properly. How could you be governed properly? The folks are scrambling around and not knowing what is going on, or they're pretending, which is also possible that the government is just pretending that it doesn't know, and it knows fully well that it is not governing this country properly and has no intention of acknowledging that and improving. But folks, we are going to touch now on the question of the oil audits, and you're going to see the same kind of bizarre poor governance echoed here. So let's get the next slide up here as we talk about these oil audits. So now what we're hearing from the GRA is that a lot of their skilled staff, especially with regard to cost oil auditing, are being poached by oil companies. Now they're saying that they need to be able to pay their staff more at the very least in order to be able to keep them and to attract people. We believe that the GRA should be fully supported with the funds, the adequate funds, to ensure that they can pay staff as required. But the reason that we're in this quagmire in the first place is the government's refusal to raise public servant salaries. And so the oil industry is moving ahead and people are being paid well there. But people in the public service are not being paid well. What do you think is going to happen? People will leave. In fact, I was discussing this very issue last year with a prominent young person in Guyana who looks at financial matters in Guyana, and the question of if the public servant salaries do not increase, whether the public service will be raided by the oil companies. That's exactly what's going on. And so the government has not been supporting the GRA in the same way that it has not been raising teachers' salaries, in the same way that it has not been raising policemen and army officers' salaries, in the same way that the average public servant has not been paid the way they should be paid. Folks, we take this opportunity to remind you that Guyana, by some measures, has a higher income per person than the United Kingdom. At purchasing power parity, we have a higher per capita income than the United Kingdom. Can you believe that? And these folks out here not paying people, and as a result, the people are leaving and going to the oil industry. Goodness me. What is going on? But that's not it, folks. It gets worse. It's even worse than that. Let's jump over to the next slide as we continue this examination of utter incompetence, folks. Now look at what Vice President Jagger is saying about this. The GRA must notify the government the inability to conduct the audits. And this is, of course, because the staff are being poached by these oil companies. Now, folks, Is it not the duty of the government, especially those tasked with dealing with oil and gas matters, like the audit of the offshore expenses, like ensuring that Guyana is not being overcharged, money is not being, that Guyana is not being fraudulently charged for expenses that it shouldn't be charged for? Isn't it not the responsibility of government ministers and senior officials tasked with overlooking the oil industry to check to ensure that everything is running smooth with these audits? What kind of nonsense are we hearing here from the government? That the GRA must notify the government. That sounds like the government has not been checking to see what is going on with the GRA and these audits. That's their whole job. Their whole job is to go and ensure that things are running smoothly. They are waiting on the GRA to tell them something. Folks, this is our comment that you hear from a government that is not serious, does not intend to audit, and is perfectly happy to let Guyana lose billions of dollars. But you have to ask yourself the question as to whether this is due to corruption. You have to ask yourself those questions. So what we want to give you tonight, folks, we want to give you a perspective. We want to help you understand what the experience of other countries has been when it comes to this type of corruption in the oil and gas industry. So you can have a sense of how serious and alarming these things are. But to hear from the government that they are not, that they have to wait for the GRA to tell them that there's an issue, and that they have not been checking with the GRA regularly, that is disturbing to hear, folks. That is disturbing. Now, let's jump across to the next slide before we hop into a quick 3-minute video to give you some full perspective here. Now, what the Vice President is also saying is, oh, it's good that labor is able to move around the economy and leave the public service. Folks, you sometimes have to want it to yourself. But the other thing that is disturbing is he's talking, oh, we put 17,000 people in gold scholarships. Folks, I know people who've taken gold scholarships and said that it did not improve their employment prospects, that it was a waste of time. I know people who've taken gold scholarships and are still working minimum wage jobs. It was a waste of the time, they told me. Folks, the gold scholarship program, which we've been saying from day one, has not been focused on the oil and gas industry's needs. It's a lot of random programs that come from universities that aren't even focused on oil and gas matters. Just random programs that you see there, and then 1 or 2 oil and gas programs mixed in. I don't know what could possibly go into their head other than let's put out big numbers so that it feels like, oh, you know, we're producing a lot of scholarships. It looks good, but it's not actually doing anything. Instead, they should be pumping that money, as we have said, Lady Opposition has said in his budget speech. We should be pumping that money into the University of Guyana to make it one of the best universities when it comes to oil and gas studies in the world. We should be ensuring that the University of Guyana students are equipped to be able to fill our needs in the oil and gas sector, both from the government side, the monitoring and evaluation, and from the private sector side. Not sending people on gold scholarships to study who knows what from universities all across the world. I mean, what kind of a plan is that? And so it is no wonder that there's a labor shortage. It is no wonder that there's a problem. Really, as the opposition leader said, it is a manifestation of incompetence. Goodness, folks, goodness. That is what we're seeing, and that is what really is so alarming around this multi-billion-dollar issue. Now, in the first audit, which we had commissioned, which they've still not released and not put forward a timeline as to their release, the government, that audit was leaked, and it was indicated that, you know, almost 13% of the funds that the oil company is claiming back in terms of cost oil, that's claiming back as its expenses, are questionable, which are, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. And they've hid that from the Guyanese people. They didn't want the Guyanese people to know that there are hundreds of millions of dollars that they could recover from these oil companies, potentially recover from these oil companies. Now, folks, there's a second audit that is currently, again, not hearing about it, and we have to continue to speak about it. And that audit, it could be as much as $1 billion that could be in question, a huge sum of money. Now, folks, just imagine they're not committing to when they'll finish these audits. Just imagine they're not staffing the GRA, supporting the GRA so it can assist with these audits. These people are serious about this, or these people are perfectly happy to let these billions of dollars go by the wayside. Now, what should we be alarmed about when it comes to corruption and oil in this country? When it comes to missing funds, as this billion and that 200 million is raising flags. Let's get some perspective from a quick video here about Nigeria's experience. And you can look at the style of governance and see if you see any parallels as to whether we're heading in that direction. Because really what is at stake here is billions of dollars over many years. We're just at the start, and we have to be alert as a nation as to the possibilities.
This regime will be firm, humane, and decisive. We will not condone nor tolerate any act of indiscipline. Any attempt to test our will be decisively dealt with.
Ill discipline, he can talk. Nigeria's late president, some say dictator, took billions out of the country and stashed it in bank accounts all over the world. Well, some of it's been found on the tiny island of Jersey. It has been seized. Who should get that money now, and how did it get there in the first place? We'll get to all of that in a moment, but first, a quick introduction to the man himself, General Sani Abacha.
This regime will be firm, humane, and decisive. We will not condone nor tolerate any act of indiscipline. Any attempt to test our will be decisively dealt with.
Sani Abacha seized power in 1993 after overthrowing a transitional government. He ruled Nigeria with absolute powers between 1993 and 1998.
General Abacha's oppressive and divisive policies threaten to engulf Africa's most populous nation.
Abacha has been the worst in a long line of human rights abuses in Nigeria.
The key oil-producing country of Nigeria is in a state of flux. Its military leader, General Sani Abacha, has died of a heart attack.
Abacha never governed the country. He terrorized the country.
Notoriously, he has jailed and executed his opponents, including human rights activist Ken Saro-Wiwa. But most of all, he looted the country.
Nigeria enjoyed unprecedented growth under General Sani Abacha, but the general ensured his family were the chief beneficiaries.
A country that was once great is now a heap of ruin. The giant of Africa is a giant of corruption.
He was named fourth most corrupt leader in history.
Abacha is said to have amassed billions of dollars through corrupt means while in office.
In all, it's estimated $5 billion was embezzled under Abacha's rule and moved to various offshore accounts overseas.
Countries such as Switzerland, France, and Britain. His successors have been trying to recover it ever since.
Funds that are valued at over £211 million belonging to the late head of state, General Sani Abacha, has now been seized from a Jersey account.
Now the Nigerian government has so far recovered $1 billion of the siphoned funds.
It's going to take us 80 years to recover $5 billion.
Well, of course, we know that Nigeria's wealth has been looted for decades and stashed all over the world. But as we heard in that report last month, $267 million was seized from Abacha's son's account in Jersey and transferred into the island's Civil Asset Recovery Fund. What happens to all that money now? We'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's look at the human cost of Abacha's regime with our special...
All right, folks, thank you very much for looking at those few minutes with us. Now, there's quite a lot to unpack in that short video. The first thing, though, I'll point out to you is the last thing that was mentioned is that the Nigerian government, through asset recovery, is attempting to bring back those funds. Some of you may recall that one of the first things the PPP did was to disband the State Asset Recovery Agency, which is the agency that would have retrieved the funds that would be any funds that are stolen and transferred abroad. So that to me is extremely suspicious to start with, right? Your first act is to take down the agency that could get back any money that you steal. All right, good start. Now, the next thing that you have to note is that you saw there $267 million that's missing. Well, folks, I just described to you that there's $200 and something million that we believe is questionable funds and that we need to look into. And that the PPP was hiding from the Guyanese people. So you have to ask yourself, what is going on with that money? Because this is extremely concerning. You also heard it you also heard in the video mention of billions now, $5 billion. Folks, what we're trying to help you to understand is this is not a one-to-one and done thing, but they can continue to be this lack of transparency, and if there's theft, continue to be theft over a prolonged period of time, because if you're not going to have any transparency, if you're not going to be allowing auditors to properly check these expenses, then you could easily be inflating the expenses and then taking a cut from that inflated expense and stashing that abroad. Now, they've mentioned some of these offshore countries and so on where that could be happening. Jersey was mentioned. You have Switzerland, France, the United Kingdom. We've mentioned some of the concerns around other oil producers and monies that have been stashed abroad. Folks, we cannot allow a situation in this country where when it comes to checking these expenses, allowing auditors to carry out their duties, paying auditors so that they can actually work to do these duties, we cannot allow a situation where we do not have that kind of oversight, because this is exactly what could happen. Now, when you look at what's going on with the GRA, where it's not being appropriately funded by the government, where the government is not supporting it, you have to ask yourself if the reason the government is not supporting it is because they see stories like this and they get a little bit jealous. They think to themselves, oh my, if we have audits, I'll never be able to steal $1 billion. But if I could prevent these audits, then I can get away with it. Folks, we cannot allow them to get away with this kind of thing. We cannot allow this to be a possibility in Guyana. We need to see these audits. We need to see these things brought to light. And we need to have our funds accounted for. That is the long and short of this issue. And it is very alarming that we're seeing the government put up so much resistance. In fact, it's only after we in the opposition lit a fire under the issue that they actually started to do anything. And even then, they continue to hide the audits. Now, I've also said that it should be a criminal offense to hide these audits. So we'll have to see whether the government is finally going to be able to produce these audits. But it's not looking good here, folks. It's not looking good at all. But one of the things you also saw that was particularly alarming, and we mentioned, is that you had effectively a police state. You had an authoritarian ruler who was using the armed forces and the police and so on to suppress opposition and so on. Now, one of the things that I was discussing with a member of a small party recently on one of the shows is the question of the way that Minister Patterson has been dealt with regarding a very minor issue, versus the fact that we have not seen Vice President Jagio arrested and questioned and be put on bail regarding the very serious corruption allegations leveled at him by a certain Sue Jerome in the Vice News documentary, the Vice News show. And so what we have not seen from the government is the police force being used in a way that is free from political interference. But rather, you're starting to see the question of the police force being used to target political opponents, to target in the way that you saw that general targeting people in Nigeria. Now, we haven't gotten as bad as what has happened there in Nigeria. But if left unchecked, and this is the point I was also making, remarking to journalists, we even saw in Saudi Arabia the question of whether a journalist was killed by authorities in the embassy. If we leave the PPP unchecked with this kind of power, accumulating money and stealing money, then they'll be perfectly happy to pay people to use security forces to suppress people, to oppress, and to target journalists, to target political opposition, to target small parties, to target civil society. That is the direction that they're going to go, and that is the type of authoritarian state that we absolutely cannot allow. The PPP really, to my mind, is a totalitarian state. That is to say that they target you once you don't believe in that. Once you're not a PPP supporter, they target you. Even if you're a moderate person, they'll target you. They don't like anyone who is not a staunch PPP supporter, and that is the opposite of what a democracy means. We believe that you should have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, that it is okay if you disagree with us. We will speak to you, and we will try and come to a better, we'll try and come to some sort of an understanding, or at least we'll give you the opportunity to engage with us properly. PAP gives you 2 weeks to engage and then shuts things off. Or when they speak to you in a tone that makes it seem like you're their child or something, that they don't have any interest in speaking to you with respect. And this is something that people have complained about across Guyana at outreaches where PUP ministers and so on, and PUP senior officials, I should say rather, are treating people in a hoggish kind of a way. That is something that is very, very alarming that we've seen from many various people within PUP. And so you're seeing citizens riling up because, I mean, if it's one thing to be treating people in a way that you should not, but it's quite another thing to be out there punishing people in a cost of living crisis while also treating people in that way. And that, I think, is why you're seeing this sort of frustration among the people where people are standing up to them and telling them, giving them a piece of their mind. Now, folks, the other thing we want to highlight as we continue here is that when the PUP does provide some sort of a benefit, it is, first of all, not the type of benefit that will really improve people's lives. And second of all, there are serious allegations around the discriminatory nature of it, where it is going only to PUP elite and supporters. Well, I shouldn't even say supporters. I should say PUP activists and so on, rather than going to those who need it, the general public, the average poor Indian or Amerindian or black person, middle class Indian and Amerindian and black people, middle class mixed people. Yeah, rather than going to people who are the best, will make the best use of the funds, or people who are in need and so on, is going to those who are close to PUP. And that, of course, is not the way to run a country. But what we've seen with the cash grants for the SLED program, and we'll give you a sense of it. Let's throw that slide up and we'll help you to understand what exactly is going on. So we've seen now that they've said the thousands will benefit from the 1.8 billion government support for small businesses. Now, folks, the first thing is, if thousands of people are to benefit, 1.8 billion doesn't sound like a whole lot of money to me. Now, in fact, what they're talking about is a $200,000 for some of these small businesses. We have said that small businesses need to be receiving $10 million. This $200,000 is an absolute joke. We've said that we believe the Small Business Bureau and other similar organizations should have budgets 10 times as large as their current budget. Now, that easily, if we're looking at a budget that's 10 times as large, that's going to be far more than this 1.8 billion. But the other thing I want to ask you folks, I want you to reflect on this. And I'm sure that they will come and try to criticize our previous programs with small businesses, I'm sure. But folks, if you're giving people $200,000 to help them with their small business, what can $200,000 do for a business? Now, let's be serious. Even if you have a shop in front of your house, $200,000 is not going to carry you very far. You can stock up on some things, but how long is that going to last you? Are you going to be able to properly expand your shop? Are you going to be able to properly stock your shop? Are you going to be able to develop, let's say maybe you produce a little bit of pepper, you have something special, you want to develop your products. Is $200,000 going to allow you to develop a product? We've said that they should be giving $10 million to small businesses. Of course, you have to have a proper process and so on. But you can give huge numbers of people $10 million because your focus is on actually creating businesses. It's not just to give you a few dollars and hope that you're all right and you back off the PUP. And so we saw recently in region, I believe it's in region 5, a few hundred people being given some money and people complaining they didn't receive the money. Now, folks, that $200,000 is not appropriate for businesses. That's the first thing. But the second thing is this. We demonstrated earlier in this show that the PUP received an unexpected $60 billion. $60 billion last year, which is $300,000 per household. That slide, just now, what we saw, operator, we go pull back up that slide. $60 billion we were talking about, unexpected. These people talking about 1.8 billion. These people are talking about $1.8 billion. That is what they're talking about. The second to last slide there, operator. The second to last slide there. These folks are talking about 1.8 billion. And they have made 60 billion that they didn't even expect. And they have this, the puff of the chest. They think to themselves they're doing a good job. 1.8 billion. And we know that the 60 billion that they didn't even expect that they got. That is $300,000 per household, folks. $300,000 per household. And they're coming here with the 200,000 for 500, 600 people. They could give hundreds of thousands of people $300,000. It is not that you can give a 500 people. You can give hundreds of thousands of people that money. This is so comical, so pathetic that this is what they come to the Guyanese people with. And we gotta call them out. Now we are happy to see some people receive benefit. We're happy to see that. Well, first of all, it shouldn't be a benefit this small. And second of all, folks, they're operating like if this is some big deal when they could give hundreds of thousands of people even more money than this. Goodness me, folks. Goodness me. This is what we're faced with. Let's go to the next slide there, operator, as we wind things here down on the lowdown. So now we've got the former Mayor Narayan, who put out some interesting remarks as well. I thought that these were, that he made an interesting point on this. And it relates again to this question of these resources, because the mayor indicated that the recent distribution of the small business cash grant, has triggered widespread criticism due to the apparent favoritism displayed towards individuals associated with the PUP. Reports suggest that a staggering 95% of the recipients were either PUP family members, friends, and party councillors or party councillors. Now, regrettably, he says, this lopsided allocation only serves to deepen divisions within Guyana, tarnishing the government's credibility and stifling the growth of small businesses. So, it is not a given, or at least the allegation is, it's not a given to the average small business owner who needs assistance, but they're given to their party people. Can you imagine this, folks? This is what we're faced with. This is the kind of divisive politics that we're faced with in this country. The friends, family, and favorites, the PUP elite politics that we're faced with in this country, crony capitalism. This is what we're faced with in this country. It is utterly disappointing. It is utterly disgusting. And it is so, the amount of money involved is so small that you really have to rub your head in disgust at these people. You have to tear your hair out of your head in disgust at these people. Can you imagine coming with a straight face to tell people that they are providing them with small business grants and so on? We have said that these grants need to be big enough to help people to build and expand their businesses, to help people to develop new products, to help people to bring these products to market, and to help people to export these products. It's not just a few dollars here and there. Will there be monitoring and evaluation of these monies once they're given out? Will there be monitoring and evaluation to see that these monies actually improve people's businesses? Or is it just money that they're giving out to try and calm down a few people who are complaining? That is what we're faced with in this country. It is a question, really, of the difference between a government that will help Guyanese to have a high standard of living, to move forward with their life, to make money and to be happy and to feel proud, versus a government that is giving a few dollars here and there, while it stashes money, while it steals money, while it hides from accountability, while it hides from any kind of proper transparency, while it attacks civil society, the opposition, small parties, anybody that dares to mention that this is what is going on and that more needs to be done. Folks, on that note, we're alarmed by this. We know that you are alarmed as well. And we want to remind you that ultimately the PAP is coming to the Guyanese public with frex, when there are huge sums available, when we have a country with a GDP per capita, purchasing power parity, one measure of income, that is higher than the United Kingdom, where you have public servants crying out that they don't have the right enough wages, and as a result, they're leaving important jobs, even like jobs in the GRA. You have a government that doesn't understand the needs of society, doesn't want to understand the needs of society, and is focused on itself and its friends, family, and supporters. Folks, on that note, we'll thank you so much for tuning in to Lowdown, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you for watching our program. See you right back here, same place, same time. And remember, hold the line of battle, comrades. Our victory is sure.